What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another episode of Star Wars Battlefront 2 Mythbusters, this time focusing on who is the fastest hero in the game. So I have been planning this one for quite a while now, but I wanted to wait until all the new characters arrived, as well as the Commando Droids, as I wanted to see them in comparison. And then I was just super busy with uni right after the new reinforcements arrived, and so I am only just coming around to this video now. So in this one, we are going to test both the regular sprint speed of all 20 characters in the game, plus the Commando Droids, and seeing who actually has the fastest sprint speed, and then we'll be also going over each character in their fastest form of movement. So for example, all the Saber users using their dashes, Boba using his jetpack, Darth Maul using his spin attack, and Palpatine using his forward lunge, among a bunch of other stuff as well. I did decide to leave out stuff like Han's shoulder charge and Grievous's claw rush and stuff like that. Even though they do make you go a lot quicker, those abilities are only available every now and then, whereas something like Maul's spin attack can be used fairly regularly. So in terms of abilities, the only things I'll be testing are Luke, Maul and Yoda's R1 abilities, all the Saber users' dashes, not the blaster users, because rolling actually makes them slower, and then Boba's jetpack as well, but I will touch on it all as we go anyway. Lastly, before I get started, I will show all the rankings on the side of your screens for both the sprint speed and the overall speed as we go through the test, and then at the end I will compare all 20 characters plus the Bx Commando, so make sure to stay right to the end for all of the final results. So the way this was measured was by standing in the exact spot you're seeing on your screen and looking at the exact same spot as well, and so I did all the dark side characters without moving Luke at all, and then I switched it to the light side characters and I did the exact same thing with Darth Maul instead. For each character, I started the timer on the exact first frame that I could see them over on the right side, and then I stopped the timer on the exact frame that they disappeared over on the left. So this is all completely accurate down to the exact frame that the character stopped and started. So starting off with the dark side characters, and first up is Boba Fett. So I started with his regular sprint speed, and this gave him a time of 2.44. I then tested the difference using his dash, as obviously he does have a pretty decent dash on him, and this one gave him a time of 2.23, wiping off a fair chunk. Lastly, I tested it using his jetpack, and this was actually more than a second faster than his regular sprint, which doesn't actually sound like much, but over this distance that is a pretty crazy amount to cut down on. Next up was Bossk, and his regular sprint came in with a time of 2.48, just a tad slower than Boba. I then also tried it with his jump just out of curiosity, and surprisingly this actually took off a whole 10 frames, coming in at 2.38 instead, so Bossk will actually move faster if you spam jump, so I guess there is a reason we all call him Bouncy Boy. Next up we had my main man Darth Vader, and surprisingly he came in with a time of 2.49 for his regular sprint, which is only just slower than Bossk, which I definitely wasn't expecting at all. Again, I tested it with his dash, and this was just a little quicker, coming in with a time of 2.28, wiping off about a third of a second. Moving on, we had Papa Palpatine with a regular sprint speed of 2.44, exactly the same as Boba Fett. I then tested using his crazy forward spin thingo, and this gave him a time of 1.56, which is pretty damn fast, much faster than I actually expected. Next up we had Kylo Ren, and his regular sprint speed was also a lot quicker than I thought, coming in with a time of 2.32. I then tested it with his lunges, and this didn't really take too much time off at all, coming in at 2.25, but at the end of the day it is still quicker than his regular sprint, but this does show that Kylo doesn't have the greatest dash. Next up was Darth Maul, and he came in with a regular sprint speed of 2.28, which puts him as the fastest regular sprint character on the dark side. I then tested with his dash, and that gave him a slightly quicker time, coming in at 2.24. Lastly, I also tested his spin attack, and this gave him a time of 1.39, which is just slower than Boba and his jetpack, which is pretty good when you think about it, because obviously a jetpack is a pretty massive advantage. Next up we had Iden, and I just tested her regular sprint because that's also her fastest way to travel, and for that she came in with a time of 2.47. Next up was Phasma, and she surprisingly came in with a time of 2.44, which was faster than Iden, and I definitely was not expecting that at all, because she does seem to feel a lot slower than most of the other characters. Next up was Grievous with his regular sprint, and he came in with a time of 2.34, which again was a little surprising because he does seem to be around the same speed as Vader, but apparently that is not the case. I then tested his dash, and this gave him a slightly faster time, coming in at 2.21. Lastly, for the dark side characters we have Dooku, and his regular sprint speed came in with a time of 2.35, just slightly slower than his apprentice. Now I also tested his dash, and remember he actually has 3 dashes, and even still he only came in with a time of 2.31, which is barely any different, so I'm not too sure what the case is with that, but it seems he doesn't have a very good dash, even though it definitely feels like he has one of the best in the game. So that is it for all the dark side characters, and you can see all their rankings compared on the sides there, and so now moving on to the light side characters, characters, you can see I set up Maul in the exact same spot, looking at the exact same spot, and so now we've got to do it all again. Starting off with Luke, and his regular sprint speed came in with a time of 2.24, which actually gives him the fastest regular sprint speed of all characters in the game. I then tested it with his dash, and this came in at 2.14. Lastly, I also tested his rush attack, and this was actually slightly slower than his dash, coming in with a time of 2.16. The next 4 characters all only need one test, which is their regular sprint. So first off we have Leia, who came in with a time of 2.42, then up next we have Han, who has the exact same time as Leia, coming in with 2.42 as well. Next up was Chewie, who came in only just slower than the other two with a time of 2.47. Next up was Lando, and surprisingly he came in only just faster than Chewie with a regular sprint speed of 2.46. Moving on, we have Rey, and her regular sprint speed came in at a pretty fast 2.34. I then also wanted to test Insight to see if that actually makes her run faster, and even though I swear it does, it came in with 2.34 as well, so apparently Insight doesn't actually make you any faster. Lastly, I also tested her dash as well, and this one came in with a time of 2.24. Next up we have our little green friend Yoda, and his regular sprint speed comes in pretty slow with a time of 2.46. I then tested his dash as well, and this does wipe off a fair bit of time, coming in at 2.26 instead. Lastly, I also tested his R1 ability, and this took off a massive amount of time, coming in at 1.48, so almost a whole second faster than his regular sprint speed. Next up was Finn, and his regular sprint speed came in exactly the same as Yoda with a time of 2.46. I then also wanted to test Undercover to see if it actually is any faster, and this came in with a time of 2.40, so you can see that Undercover does actually make you slightly faster. Next up we had Obi-Wan, and his regular sprint speed is actually pretty quick, coming in at a time of 2.34. I then tested his dashes as well, and to no surprise he only wiped off 2 frames with the dashes coming in at 2.32, which is to be expected because his dash animation is no doubt the worst animation in the game. Now lastly, for the light side we have the Broken One, whose sprint speed came in with a time of 2.30. Again, I tested his dashes and he wiped off a fair amount of time, coming in with a time of 2.12, making him one of the quicker light side characters, just to add to his collection of overpowered stats. Now, just to compare, because a lot of you guys have asked recently, I also tested the Bx Commando Droids, so their regular sprint speed comes in at 2.39, which is pretty decent for a reinforcement. I then tested those deadly dashes, and they came in with a time of 2.04, which again is pretty damn good. Lastly, I also tried the dash and slash technique, as we call it, and this is a little slower, coming in at 2.07. However, over a very long distance, this is quicker than their regular dashes, as it is pretty much infinite. So that is it for all of the tests. I'm going to pop the regular sprint speed ranking up on your screen now so you can see the full list of characters. So feel free to pause that and have a look. And then I will also pop the overall speed rankings as well. So again, if you do want to see the list in detail, then feel free to pause and take a proper look. But that is going to do it for this one, guys. This has been in the making for quite a while now, and it is a pretty tedious video to make, as I'm sure you can tell by all the moving parts on the screen. So if you did enjoy the video, guys, make sure to smash that like button, as it really does help support the channel. If you guys have any suggestions for future Mythbusters episodes, then make sure to leave them down in the comments section. It is getting a little harder to come up with ideas for these Mythbusters videos, so if you do have anything you want me to test, then definitely let me know down below. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.